bill, we went back into this 4x4, and we sat, she and I, and then we began to navigate. We began to try to see where my skills matched up here in a local area for long term. Nothing with the kind of money that I was making, nothing. But then what I got from Sally in her encouragement was a continuous, this is how you navigate the employer Florida, so forth and so on. If you need any help, you call me. And with that being said, I ended up landing a job with the district. Praise God for that. School district. And things moved right along, and the money came in, and the lack seemed to disappear as my faith never failed. And then all of a sudden, I found myself needing a little bit more encouragement. And then with that, I was looking how I could further my career, get into the management area so that I could get back to the provisions that I was used to for myself and family. And came across a $500 scholarship is what I needed for a particular enhancement program. They were housed and found a home over with Pathways for Change. That was Doorknob. I immediately thought about Sally. I called Sally up. I said, Sally, look, it's me, Bobby, and I went through the spiel and I said, do you remember me? She said, yes, of course I do. And with that being said, she said, well, we don't do scholarships. But let me go to my supervisors. Let me see what I can do. And I waited for the call, and then I kept moving forward. I kept trying to seek, assistance for scholarships. And Sally called me back. She said, hey, I got good news. I said, what is it? She says, if we can find somebody to help us match, I believe we can make this scholarship happen. $250 and $250. And I kept pressing forward. And Sally would never let me give up. She said, look, listen, you're gonna be fine. Because, and I hope I don't embarrass her, she says, you're a go-getter. That's exactly what she said. That fire with the faith that I already had, the scholarship came through. But more importantly, she wanted to know how things worked out. I took the class. The class offered me far more value than $500. Something called soft skills. Corporate would know about that most of our graduates with degrees don't know anything about soft skills. Okay? And so here I stand before you today with the relationship and your donation, your trust in United Ministries, and people like Sally working for that organization, and believing in people like me. I stand before you with 3 different job offers, one with the school district with the possibility of management, and I was told, and I quote, if you ever feel ambitious enough, come on over here where we are. That's what I was told. And I thank God for that. And it was the encouragement, the relationship, the checkbacks that Sally did that helped me along the way. And over at Doorknob, it has also done a great thing. It has created a possibility of a job in partnership with the very organization that I took the class from. 20 years of experience just might turn into a partnership because of United Ministries and the encouragement of Sally. Thank you.
Our thanks to Bobby, Sam, and Rebecca for sharing their heartwarming stories. But now, as I close my speech about the early days of United Ministries, I want to add that it is my firm belief that God played the major guiding role in the creation and ultimate success of United Ministries. And during the struggles our ministry has faced over the years, there were times when our funds were almost at a zero balance. Then it almost would seem like a miracle when a check from a local donor would arrive to keep us afloat. We were often reminded, never ever underestimate the value of keeping the faith.
Well, that was incredible. And I am so thankful for those who've shared their stories, whether in person. That's a vulnerable thing to do and a powerful thing to do. So we're thankful for all the stories that we've been able to hear tonight. And now, without further ado, I am going to introduce our keynote speaker. Shane Claiborne is a prominent speaker, activist, and best-selling author. Shane worked with Mother Teresa in Calcutta and founded the Simple Way in Philadelphia. He heads up Red Letter Christians, a movement of folks who are committed to living as if Jesus meant the things he said. Shane is a champion of grace. Shane's books include Jesus for President, Red Letter Revolution, Common Prayer, Follow Me to Freedom, Jesus, Bombs, and Ice Cream, Becoming the Answer to Our Prayers, his classic, The Irresistible Revolution, and his newest book, Executing Grace. He has been featured in a number of films, including Another World is Possible and Ordinary Radicals. His books have been translated into more than a dozen languages. Shane speaks over 100 times a year, nationally and internationally. His work has appeared in Esquire, Spin, Christianity Today, and the Wall Street Journal, and he has been on everything from Fox News and Al Jazeera to CNN and NPR. He's given academic lectures at Harvard, Princeton, Liberty, Duke, and Notre Dame. Shane is a loving, bridge-building child of God. It is such a great honor to introduce him tonight. I can't wait to sit back and allow him to bring refreshing to our journeys. Get ready, though, to never be the same again.
It's my least favorite part where I got to hear all that stuff, but that was so nice. And it's really my honor to be here tonight, to celebrate 30 years with you, to hear the powerful testimonies and stories, and to share a little bit. You can tell I'm not from Tennessee. I mean, I am from Tennessee. I'm not from Philly. I grew up in East Tennessee, and I can remember hearing a story growing up that somebody told me about this homeless guy that came to worship on Sunday morning. And he strolled into sort of the fancy church, and he sat up front and had, everything with him. He had several bags and layers of clothes, and everybody kind of looked at him like he didn't quite belong. But he worshiped Jesus. And then after the service, the pastor came up to him and said, "Sir, I want you to do something. I want you to ask God what you should wear when you come to church." And a week passed, and the homeless guy actually came again the next Sunday. And he came up front and sat down just like he had before, wearing all the layers he had and his bags with him. And the pastor saw him before the service and said, "I recognize you. You were here last week, and I asked you to do something. Did you do it?" And the fellow said, "Yeah, Pastor, I did. I asked God what I should wear, and God said he didn't know because he's never been to your church." We sort of laugh, but I think we all know how good we are in the church at excluding the very people that Jesus magnetized, right? And sometimes we are more often known for the self-righteousness that Jesus called out in the Pharisees than the love that those on the margins felt so deeply and were gravitized towards Jesus. And there's a story that I've come to love. I love the Bible, so I hope you will let me share a story that Jesus told that I really like a lot. Some of you may have heard it a lot of times, and so just listen with fresh ears. But it's a beautiful story from the book of Luke, chapter 16. And it goes like this. Jesus was speaking and he said this: there was a man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and he lived in luxury every day. Now outside of his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and they licked the beggar's sores. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels rescued him. They carried him to Abraham's side. And the rich man also died, and he was buried. In hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. And he called to him, Father Abraham, have compassion on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water to cool my tongue, because I'm in agony in this fire. But Abraham replied, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you, there is a great chasm. There is a great chasm, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from you to us. I know that kind of ruins the vibe in the room, but I heard a preacher once say that we know we've really heard the gospel when it comforts the disturbed and disturbs the comfortable. Because the gospel that we read is good news to the poor. And it's that news, which growing up in East Tennessee, I don't think I heard too many stories like that. I think when I grew up was all about going to heaven when we die, And I'm excited about the afterlife. We'll party like there's no tomorrow, and there won't be. But at the end of the day, the more I read Jesus, the more I saw that he wasn't just concerned about life after death, but the kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven. Amen. I'm going to need you to tap into your inner Pentecostal tonight. But too often we've used our faith as a ticket into heaven and a license to ignore the world around us. We've promised people there's life after death, and a lot of them are going, is there life before death? Doesn't the good news have anything to say now? And that's why I like this story. The early Christians, they preached on this story of the rich man Lazarus. I have a whole book of sermons just on that passage we just read. And it's interesting because one of the things that they point out is that there's this dynamic that Jesus is doing with the names in the story, right? That the rich man doesn't have a name and the poor man does. And they say we need to pay attention to that, because the beggar's name is Lazarus, and it means the one God rescued. That's what his name means. And he said, the early Christians said, but the rich man doesn't have a name. He could be any one of us. And the funny thing is that in this world, we know the names of all the rich folks, right? We've got plaques on our walls. We've got bricks named after them. We've got monuments and boulevards named after them. But we don't know the names of those who are dying without anybody holding their hand. And God knows their names. Amen? That story is about how personally God cares about those who are hurting in our world. And there's also this interesting thing the early Christians say, that there's a religious dynamic, that we don't know too much about the poor man or his faith, but we do see in the rich man that he calls Abraham father. And as you read on, he knows the prophets, he knows the stories. It appears that he was a religious man, but his religion did nothing to move him in compassion, right? To get to know and to love and care for the hurting person right on the other side of his wall. And come to find out, it looks like though, like so often we build these gated worlds because we want to separate ourselves from the suffering, but we think we're locking ourselves into safety, but we actually lock ourselves into loneliness, right? Because we're made to love and be loved. We're made for compassion. And you look in some of the wealthiest corners of the world, we have the highest rates of loneliness and depression and suicide. Sometimes we're the richest, loneliest people in the world. So we gotta, the invitation of this story, I think, is to get outside of the walls and the gates and the gated communities and the office cubicles and the ways that we separate ourselves from the suffering of the world around us. Amen? And I think I've been on that journey trying to figure it out for 20 years because I grew up really well off, and I could have lived and died, I think, in East Tennessee without seeing much suffering in the world. And I always knew the world was a little bigger than that. That's kind of part of what drew me up to Philly. Not that there wasn't suffering in East Tennessee or in Appalachia, but I think I just needed to get out of my little world a little bit. I came up to Philly and I went to college originally, a fine school named Eastern University, but I came up and I was like a fish out of water. You know, I was decorating my college dorm room, and I put my high school yearbook on the shelf, and it had a Confederate flag on it because my high school was the Maryville Rebels. We had the Confederate flag on all of our football uniforms and cheerleaders. We had murals with the Confederate flag. I put it on my bookshelf, and my friend, my new college buddy, was like, "What is that?" I'm like, "That is my high school yearbook." He's like, "That is also not cool, man." Like, and I found out. I got schooled a little bit, right? That the Confederate flag wasn't just about high school football spirit, you know? But it was much bigger than that. And I began to see that we all have a lens through which we see the world. And we become wiser when we can see the world through one another's lenses, right? And I think part of what the rich man needed was to see the world through the eyes of Lazarus. The wiser we are is often how diverse we are. In our community, we like to say if it's all white, it's not quite right. You know, because it's about the diversity of the kingdom. And we live in a segregated world that Dr. King lamented even in the church. Sometimes the most segregated hour in the world is 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. When the church gathers for worship, we end up conforming to the segregation. And all of us in the world are most comfortable around people who are like us. That's totally normal. Everybody's most comfortable. There's no unifier like cultural sameness, right? And yet, that's why Jesus is going, everybody in the world loves their friends and their neighbors. Your love is to be bigger than that, right? You're to live, to love outside the box. You're to love even your enemies, but especially people that are different from you. So that was new for me, you know. I started getting to know folks on the street, and I met some of the most amazing people, folks that knew the Bible left and right better than I did. When I first started going downtown to spend time with folks that were living on the streets, I was so nervous. I thought, you know, I had all these presumptions in my head. I thought they're going to hear my southern accent. They're going to think I'm an easy target. I might get mugged. And so when I first went down, I hid all my credit cards in my dorm room, so they would be safe. And then I went downtown, and while I was hanging out downtown, someone broke into my dorm room and stole my credit card and went to TJ Maxx shopping. I know, because we caught them on tape. But it was funny because these people, I had been conditioned to mistrust. Never took anything from me. And the folks I was conditioned to trust, it wasn't that simple, right? My world began to be blown away. I saw things differently. I remember one of my first experiences living in my neighborhood. I live right off of, I guess, what would be considered like a red light district. It's the avenue, Kensington Avenue in North Philadelphia. There's a lot of tears, a lot of pain under the Ave, and there's a lot of folks struggling in their lives, and there's a lot of women on the avenue too. And so one day as we're walking to the grocery store to get food, one of the women approached me, and I hadn't had that happen a lot, so I kind of was just feeling really awkward. And I didn't want to not talk to her, didn't want to talk to her too much. I just felt awkward, mainly. And so we got our food, we went back to the house, and we're unloading our groceries, and come to find out the bag of bread I had picked out had a little tear in the side, and so the bread was all crusty and moldy, and my friend said, well, it's all right, I got the receipt, we'll just go back. I'm like, awesome. We get to do it all again, you know? So we go back, and we take our bread back, and we get to the store, and we exchange the loaf of bread, no problem, but then on the way home, we see that woman. This time she's down in the alleyway, and she's shivering in the cold. And we know full well we can't just pass by her. So we go down in the alley, we kneel down, and we start talking to her, and we tell her our names, and she tells us hers, and we said, listen, you look like you need a safe place to get warm. We got a little place around the corner. You're welcome to come back with us. If you need somebody to listen to, we're there for you. If you're hungry, we got some good bread and stuff, you know. So she follows us back to the house, and we get back to the house, and we walk in the door, and as we walk in the door, she says the strangest thing. I mean, first she just falls apart, and she starts weeping, and my friend is just holding her in her arms. She's just rocking her back and forth as she cries. But as this young woman, she kind of gathers herself, she looks up, and she says the strangest thing. She goes, you guys are Christians, aren't you? Like, whoa, you know, check my shirt, no, and I'm like, we don't have a sign outside that says repent or burn, you know, nothing. I was like, how'd you know, you know? And she says, I know because I can see it in your eyes. She said, I can feel it. She said, I used to be so in love with Jesus that I had that fire inside of me. She said, I used to shine like the stars in the sky. And then she said, but it's a cold, dark world. And it's beginning to suffocate the light inside of me. It's beginning to kill the good in me. And she said, I want you to pray for me. We prayed for her. You know, we wrapped our arms around her. We prayed that she would feel that fire begin to burn, right? That she would hear the whisper we all need to hear, that she is beloved, she is beautiful, she's a child of God. And she left that night, and we didn't know if we'd ever see her again. And weeks and weeks passed, and then one night there was a knock at the door, and we get a lot of knocks at the door, so I didn't think too much of it. It was a little bit late though, so I open the door, and this woman just jumps in the house. She's like, hey! I'm like, whoa, dude, we know each other. Let's start there, you know. And she says, yeah, you just don't recognize me because I'm a new woman. I'm shining again. And then I knew who she was, right? She was talking 100 miles an hour. She said, I wanted to just come back and tell you thank you for reaching out when I was really at the bottom. She said, I wanted to give you a little gift. But then you could see almost apologetically, she kind of said, listen, I don't have much though. I lost pretty much everything I had when I was living on the streets. And she said, but I did smoke a lot of cigarettes. And I always collected the coupons from the sides of the cigarette boxes because you can trade them in for stuff. And she said, hold on. She goes out the car and she comes back with a shoebox that I can tell is just bubbling over with cigarette box sides, you know, these Marlboro Miles. And she goes, they're all yours. Awesome. My mom's going to love it when I come home with a Marlboro cap on. You know, I came to find out that those little Marlboro Miles make really good page markers for your Bible, and that's what I use them for. And every time I open up my Bible and I see that, I'm reminded that we have a God that is loving people back to life and loving a world back to life. And we get to be a part of that story, right? That this is a resurrection story. It's a story about a God that is always breathing life into us. And I've come to find out, you know, one of my friends, that we miss it so easily. One of my friends, he's one of those guys that just loves to argue theology. You know those people, right? If you don't know those people, you probably are those people. I tell him the story I just told you right after it happened. I told him that story, and I'm thinking he's going to be moved. He goes, well, you know, the thing I think about Jesus is he never actually talked to a prostitute. I'm like, hold on, man. So I get my word out. I'm ready. I know it. You know, and I get it ready. And he said, no, listen to me. He said, Jesus didn't talk to a prostitute because he didn't see a prostitute. He just saw a child he was in love with. And I thought, okay, you win, but just this one time. But I believe that part of being a Christian is not just having new ideas, but having new eyes, right? That we see people as children of God. This is, incidentally, I think that there's something to be said for the ways that we can manage organizations. But I got to say, I think Jesus would fail some of his social work classes